What if I told you there are women in America today who run entire households in places where you cannot drive a car, not because they choose to, but because there is no road, no highway, no exit ramp for hundreds of miles in any direction? Women who pay $14 for a single gallon of milk and don't even blink. Women who can gut and dry a winter's worth of salmon with a curved knife older than the United States. And then, that same night, be the only person standing between a dying neighbor and the grave, because the nearest doctor is a 4-hour flight away, if the weather even lets the plane take off. In some of these villages, a young woman finishes high school in a building shared by 30 kids, and then faces a choice almost no one outside Alaska ever has to make: stay in the only home her family has known for 10,000 years, or fly off to a city she's only ever seen in pictures, knowing she may never fully belong to either world again. And here's the strangest part. Most of them would not trade their lives for yours. These women aren't living in the past. They have smartphones, Wi-Fi, and Amazon wish lists. But the moment that small plane lifts off the gravel strip and the village shrinks to a handful of rooftops on the tundra below, the rules of the modern world simply stop applying. And today, we are going to uncover the hidden facts and realities that create curiosity about their lives. Let's count down 12 things about their lives that almost no outsider ever sees. And I promise you, number 1 is going to stay with you long after this video ends. Number 12, a place with no road. Start with the thing your brain refuses to accept. There is no road. We're not talking about a bad road, or a long road, or a dirt road that floods in spring. We're talking about no road, period. Picture a village 200 miles from the nearest highway, and then realize there is nothing in between but tundra, rivers, swamp, and sky. You cannot drive there. You cannot walk there in any sane amount of time. If you want in or out, you go up. For a woman living here, that single fact reshapes everything. There's no running to the store. No popping over to her mom's the next town over. No ambulance that can reach her front door. The grocery store, the hospital, the airport, the family 200 miles away, all of it lives on the other side of a plane ticket and a weather forecast. And the weather has a vote. When the fog rolls in or the wind picks up, the planes don't fly. Nobody comes in. Nobody goes out. A village can be completely sealed off from the rest of the planet for days at a time, and there is absolutely nothing anyone can do about it but wait. So the women here learn early to think differently, to stock up, to plan months ahead, to never ever assume that help is just around the corner. Because out here, there is no corner. But isolation is only half the shock. Because the second a plane does land with groceries, that's when the real surprise begins. Number 11, the $14 gallon of milk. In Anchorage, a gallon of milk runs you about $4. Normal, forgettable. Now fly that same gallon out to a tiny village off the road system and watch the price climb into another universe. In remote Alaska, a gallon of milk routinely costs $12, $14, even $18. And milk is just the opening act. A block of cheese can hit $15, $20, even $25. A pound of butter, $8. A dozen eggs, $10 or $12. Bread, orange juice, a bag of chips, nearly $10 each. A bag of coffee can cross $17. Why? Because almost nothing is grown up here. Alaska imports the overwhelming majority of its food, and for these villages, every single item has to be flown in by small plane after traveling thousands of miles from the lower 48. Fuel, weather delays, spoilage on the runway, it all gets baked into the price tag on the shelf. When a plane sits grounded for 3 days waiting for the fog to lift, the lettuce wilts, and somebody, somewhere, pays for that wilted lettuce. Imagine being a mother of 4 standing in that tiny village store, doing the math in her head, a jug of milk that would feed her kids for 2 days, costing what some families in the lower 48 spend on a week of breakfast. This is the everyday reality the women here navigate without complaint, because complaining doesn't lower the price. So how on earth does anyone afford to live like this? That's where the math gets genuinely fascinating. And it's the next thing almost no outsider understands. Number 10. How the budgets actually work. Here's a question that breaks most people's brains. If a block of cheese costs $15 and a plane ticket to the nearest town costs a couple hundred each way, how does a household out here survive financially? The answer is a kind of disciplined genius you almost never see in the modern world. First, many of these families budget not by the week but by the half year. They plan 6 months out, setting money aside in advance for the big, unavoidable expenses. The flights, the heating fuel, the bulk grocery orders. There's even a special mail system in Alaska, the bypass mail program, that lets people order food in bulk and have it flown in cheaper than buying it on the shelf, as long as the order is heavy enough. So women plan enormous shipments, cases of canned goods, flour, dry staples, time to land before winter slams the door shut. Then there's the permanent fund dividend, Alaska's famous yearly payout, where the state shares its oil wealth with residents. For 2025, it came to $1,000 per person. That sounds modest until you realize that for a family of 5, that's $5,000 landing in October, and in a village where everything costs double. That check is a lifeline. People here often spend it before it even arrives. On fuel, on winter supplies, on the flight to see a specialist in the city. And the wages that do exist out here come with a premium. A teacher in the bush might earn several $1,000s more than a teacher in the lower 48, precisely because life costs so much more. But even that premium gets eaten alive by the cost of simply existing 200 miles from a road. Yet here's the secret these women understand that the rest of us forget. Money is only one currency out here. The real wealth, the thing that actually carries a family through a 9-month winter, doesn't come from a store at all. It comes from the land, and preparing for that is a season unto itself. But before we get to the food, we need to talk about the women themselves, because the people running all of this are not who outsiders expect. Number 9, the women who hold it all together. When people picture Alaska, they picture rugged men, trappers, fishermen, mountain guides. What they don't picture is the woman standing at the center of nearly every bush household, quietly holding the whole structure upright. These women are, frankly, some of the most capable people you will ever encounter. Beauty out here isn't measured the way it is on a city street. It's a different standard entirely. Strength, steadiness, the ability to butcher a moose and braid a child's hair, and run a household budget in the same afternoon. Many carry the features of the Yupik, Inupiat, and Athabascan peoples who have lived on this land for thousands of years, and they carry their traditions on their faces and in their hands. Watch one of them work and you'll understand. She wakes before the light, and in deep winter, the light barely comes at all. She checks the wood stove, gets the kids moving toward a tiny school, and then turns to whatever the season demands. Fish to cut, berries to sort, a snowmobile to fix, an elder to look in on. The ulu, that curved, fan-shaped knife that's older than the country itself, moves in her hand like an extension of her own arm. And these are not women trapped in some frozen past. They text, they scroll. They run Facebook groups where the whole region trades news, sells crafts, and tracks who's flying in on the next plane. They're modern and ancient at the same time, switching between worlds without missing a beat. But modern life collides with village life hardest in one particular place. And it's something every young woman out here eventually has to face head on. Number 8, love, marriage, and a village of 300. Now imagine being a single 20-year-old woman in a village of 300 people. You've known every person your age since birth. You went to school with them, fished with them, grew up tangled into the same handful of families. So when it comes to dating, the pool isn't small, it's almost non-existent. In a place this size, a new face stepping off the plane becomes the most talked about event of the month. This is one of the quiet pressures of bush life that outsiders never think about. Family ties run deep and wide, which is beautiful, but it also means romance has to navigate a web of relations that everyone in the village can recite from memory. Many young women end up facing the same fork in the road: stay and accept the limits of a tiny community, or fly out to the city for college, work, or simply a wider world, and risk drifting away from the home that made them. Some leave and never come back. Some leave, taste the city, and return with relief, realizing the noise and the crowds were never for them. And some stay from the start, marry young, and pour themselves into family and subsistence the way their mothers and grandmothers did before them. What ties them together is that the choice is never casual. To leave the bush is to leave a way of life that can't really be carried in a suitcase. To stay is to accept everything we've talked about: the prices, the isolation, the danger. And most of the women who stay will tell you it's worth it, for reasons the outside world struggles to grasp. One of those reasons fills the air every August, when the entire village turns its attention to a single ancient task. Number 7, stocking the Earth's pantry for winter. When summer finally arrives, brief, golden, and frantic, the women of the bush enter their most important season of the year. Not a vacation, a harvest. This is subsistence, and it is the true backbone of survival out here. As the salmon return up the rivers, the smokehouses come alive. Women and their families set nets, pull in fish by the hundreds, and then begin the real work: slicing each salmon into long strips with the ulu, hanging them on driftwood racks until the air smells of smoke and fish from one end of the village to the other. As the old saying goes, putting away preserved food is like putting money in the bank. Except this bank feeds your children through 9 months of darkness. It's generational. Grandmothers teach mothers, mothers teach daughters, and little girls learn to handle a berry before they can barely walk. All summer the women gather wild berries by the gallon: blueberries, salmon berries, cloudberries, crowberries, sorting and storing them for the cold months ahead. But the land doesn't always cooperate anymore. In recent years, some of the great salmon runs have collapsed to historic lows. Rivers that once saw over 1 million fish reduced to a fraction of that, with subsistence fishing shut down to protect what's left. For families who count on that fish to survive the winter, an empty net isn't a disappointment, it's a crisis, and it falls hardest on the women who have to stretch what little comes in across a long, hungry season. All of which leads to the food itself. And some of it is unlike anything you've ever put in your mouth. Number 6, the foods outsiders can't quite handle. Let's talk about what actually ends up on the table out here, because some of it will stop you cold. First, the famous one, akutak, sometimes called Eskimo ice cream. It's whipped fat, traditionally animal fat, blended with fresh berries and a little sugar into something light and rich, and completely unlike the ice cream you know. It's a celebration food, served at gatherings, funerals, and feasts, and to refuse a bowl is almost an insult. Then there's seal oil, poured over dried fish, used as a dip, prized as one of the most important foods in the whole diet. To a newcomer it's overpowering. To the people here, it's the taste of home itself. And then there are the foods that test even adventurous eaters: stinkheads, fish heads, fermented in the ground until they reach a flavor and aroma that is exactly as intense as the name suggests. Up north, muktuk, the skin and blubber of whale, chewed raw or pickled. These aren't novelty dishes invented to shock anyone. They are thousands of years of survival science, ways to pack maximum nutrition and fat into the body to outlast the cold, using methods that worked long before refrigerators existed. The women are the keepers of all of it: the recipes, the techniques, the timing. They decide what gets dried, what gets fermented, what gets shared with which elder. They are, in a very real sense, the food system of an entire community. But food is survival of the body. The next woman we meet is responsible for something even higher stakes, survival of life itself. Number 5. The flying nurse and the woman in the clinic. Here's a fact that shocks almost everyone. In most of these villages, there is no doctor. None. Not nearby, not on call, not a short drive away, because again, there is no drive. Instead, there's the community health aide, and she might just be the most important person in the village. For more than half a century, Alaska has run one of the most remarkable health systems on the continent. Around 550 community health aides and practitioners, many of them local women, serve more than 170 villages across the state. These are people born and raised in the community, trained intensively to do far more than a typical nurse. They're part family doctor, part emergency medic, part counselor. They deliver babies, they set broken bones, they treat gunshot wounds and stitch wounds and handle the gravest emergencies, often as the only medical provider for 100 miles, working under a distant physician's guidance by phone or radio. And then there are the itinerant nurses, the flying nurses, public health professionals, who travel from village to village by bush plane, bringing vaccines, checkups, and care to communities that would otherwise have none. When that plane lands, a line forms. Whole families get seen in a single visit, because nobody knows when the next plane will come. Think about the weight a woman in this role carries. When a child spikes a fever at 2 a.m., when an elder collapses, when someone is hurt out on the river, she is who they call. Not 911, her. By name in the dark. And on the worst nights, she faces the one situation that defines life in the bush more than any other. The moment everything depends on a plane that may not be able to come. Number 4. A medical emergency with no road out. This is the part that keeps people up at night when they really understand bush life. Picture it. Late winter, a serious injury or a sudden life-threatening illness in a village 200 miles from the nearest hospital. There is no road. There is no ambulance. There is only one option. A medevac plane that has to fly in, land on a tiny strip, and fly the patient out to a regional hub, and from there, often, all the way to a major hospital in Anchorage. Now add the cruelest variable of all, the weather. Because the same fog and wind and storms that seal these villages off from groceries also ground the medevac planes, and so the people who care for the sick out here, the health aides, the mothers, the families, sometimes have to do the unthinkable, keep a critically ill person alive by hand, through the night, sometimes for days, while the weather refuses to break and the plane sits grounded on a runway hundreds of miles away. There are stories across the bush of aides staying up all night with a badly injured patient, doing everything humanly possible with the supplies on hand, just trying to hold the line until the sky clears enough for a plane to land. No imaging machines, no surgeon, no backup. Just skill, nerve, and the hope that the clouds lift in time. For the women who shoulder this, as health aides, as mothers, as the steady hands everyone turns to. It is the heaviest truth of their world. Out here, help is real, but it is never guaranteed, and never fast. They live every single day with a risk most of us never think about for even a second. And yet they stay, which raises the question, how do they even move across this land at all? Number 3. Roads made of ice and rivers, made of highway. If there are no roads, how does anyone get anywhere? The answer is one of the most fascinating things about life up here. In summer, the rivers are the roads. Women load up open skiffs, small flat boats, and run them up and down the waterways to fish camps, to neighboring villages, to berry grounds. The river is a highway, a grocery route, and a social network all at once. Then winter changes everything. As the temperature plunges, those same rivers freeze solid and become ice roads. Snowmobiles, called snow machines up here, replace the boats entirely. A woman might cross a frozen river by snow machine to check on a relative, haul supplies, or take her kids to a neighboring village, gliding over water that months earlier she crossed by boat. Above all of it, year-round, there's the bush plane. These small aircraft are the lifeline of the entire region, flying in milk and mail and medicine, flying out the sick and the injured and the kids leaving for college. A flight from a regional hub out to a village might cost a couple $100 each way for a journey of under an hour. For people here, boarding a tiny plane is as routine as the rest of us catching a bus, except this bus only flies when the sky allows. Children here grow up knowing the sound of an incoming plane, the way other kids know the ice cream truck. It means groceries. It means visitors. It means the world, briefly, reaching in. But not every village in this land is still alive. Some have gone silent, and the reason is heartbreaking. Number 2, the villages that are disappearing. Scattered across the Alaska bush are places that used to be home and aren't anymore, and more are being lost every year. Some of these were old seasonal camps and settlements, abandoned generations ago as families gathered into year-round villages. But the most haunting losses are happening right now. As the climate warms, the permafrost that these villages are built on is thawing, and the rivers and coastlines are eating the land out from under people's homes. Entire communities have watched the ground literally crumble toward their doorsteps. In some cases, there's no choice left but to move the whole village, to pick up a community that has stood in one place for generations, and relocate it, building by building, to higher, safer ground nearby. It's one of the most wrenching things imaginable, leaving behind the exact spot where your grandparents are buried, where you learned to fish, where every memory you have was made. Not because you want to, but because the earth itself is forcing you out. For the women holding these families together, it's a grief layered on top of everything else. They are not just managing households and clinics and winters. They are watching the land that defines them slowly change beneath their feet and trying to carry a culture forward to ground that doesn't yet feel like home. And that brings us to the final truth, the one that explains everything and the one almost no outsider ever truly understands. Number 1, why they stay after everything. The $14 milk, the months of isolation, the dangerous winters, the medical emergencies with no road out, the disappearing land. There's one question that outsiders always ask. Why would anyone choose to live like this? And the women of the bush will look at you, a little puzzled by the question, and give you an answer the rest of the world has almost forgotten. Because this is home. Not home the way we throw the word around, a house, an address, a place to sleep. Home the way it was meant to be, a piece of land that has held your family for thousands of years. A community where everyone knows your name. A way of life rich enough that the people living it pity us for what we've traded away. Out here, a child grows up surrounded by family, learning to read the river and the sky, learning to provide, learning that the elders matter and the land takes care of you if you take care of it. The wealth isn't in the bank account, it's in the smokehouse, in the shared akutak at a funeral, in the whole village turning out when one family is in trouble. The women here are not enduring a hard life they're trapped in. Many of them are living the only life that has ever felt fully true. And they are holding the entire thing up with their own 2 hands. That's the hidden reality. Not the prices. Not the isolation. The fact that in one of the harshest, most expensive, most remote corners of America, there are women who have everything the rest of us are still searching for. And they're not searching at all. So this is the world most travelers never see, and never could see from a cruise ship deck. 200 miles from the nearest road, where the milk costs $14 and the planes only fly when the sky permits. A generation of women is doing something quietly extraordinary. They are running households that the modern world could barely imagine surviving. They are the cooks and the budgeters, the fishers and the berry pickers, the nurses and the medics and the keepers of a culture 10,000 years deep. They face winters that swallow the sun, emergencies with no fast way out, and a land that is literally shifting beneath them. And they meet all of it with a steadiness that humbles anyone lucky enough to witness it. We came looking for the shock of the prices and the strangeness of the isolation, What we found instead were people who are richer in the ways that actually matter than almost anyone watching this. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. The Alaska bush isn't just a remote place on a map. It's a reminder that some of the strongest people on Earth are living lives we'll never fully understand, out past the end of every road. And that's the hidden side of Alaska's bush. From its beautiful women and fascinating traditions to its remote villages, unusual foods, and everyday challenges, this is a place that proves the world is still full of surprises. But now we want to hear from you. Which fact surprised you the most? Could you imagine living here? And would you ever visit this place yourself? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next adventure into another fascinating corner of the world. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next documentary.